Hello! Good evening po sa lahat. Magandang gabi, Berna. At sa ating guest, papakilala natin mamaya. Hi, Berns, where are you
Makakalika
today?
nasa somewhere in Cavite po.
Cavite. Yes.
Mga kalikasan gabi po. Wow!
Wow! Makasaribuhay na gabi.
Oo,
High diversity,
oo.
wildlife. Yan po ang aming bati ngayon dahil bago po natin ipakilala ang ating episode ngayon, sino ating pasalamatan muna in the bit, Burns?
Yes po. So, first day of March ngayon. So, we're welcoming March po in a wild, in a wildly manner. And in celebration po kasi ng ating World Wildlife Day, yung episode 9 po natin for tonight is Wild Investment for Wild Returns. And ayun po, papakilala namin mamaya na deeper level ang ating guest po ngayon. And para po matutunan natin on how to invest in people and planet through community-based practices and, to sustain the world. And ang ating pong live stream ngayon ay simultaneously po naka-live po tayo sa ENet Philippines na ating partners, of course, ng Senior City po, ang senior sa panahon ng COVID, yung Lapis, SeeSaw, and of course, yours truly po, Philippine Reconstruction and PRRM.
Yan. Kami po ngayon ni Berna ang mag-host ngayong gabi. Last week, ang nag-host naman ay yung ating original co-host, si Sir Ed De La Torre at si Ma'am Girly Villariba. So ngayong gabi ay kami ni Berna muli para sa pagdiriwang ng World Wildlife Day na sinaselebrate sa isang araw, usually, anong araw ba, petsa? Ng buwan ng March every year. At mahalagang mamaya lalo nating mapag-uusapan bakit mahalaga ba na ipagdiwang, alalahanin, i-commemorate at pag-isipan natin ng paulit-ulit ang kahalagahan ng wildlife sa ating mundo, sa ating buhay, sa lahat ng aspects ng ating buhay. Pag-uusapan natin yan lalo mamaya. So nakita niyo po dito sa bandang kaliwa ng ating post live ng World Wildlife Day. Ayun pala, March 3 pala ang celebration, ang petsa na celebration ng World Wildlife Day. At ang tema po sa taong ito ay Wildlife Conservation Finance or Investing in People and Planet. Marami na pong gumagawa niyan, hindi lang NGOs, pati mga governments and local governments na nag-invest sa ganitong wildlife preservation, conservation, protection, and development. Pero pag-usapan natin, sapat na ba ito o kulang pa? At kailangan pa nating i-upscale, i-expand, i-intensify ang ating mga efforts. So for tonight, kami po ni Berna ay sasamahan ng isa naming kaibigan kasama sa trabaho. Siya po ay walang iba kundi si Dr. Sharon Taylor. Siya ang ating guest ngayong gabi. Siya po ay isang marine science and climate change expert sa Philippine Rural Reconstruction Movement. Siya po ang aming in-house. Kung ano man po ang nangyayari dyan sa ating klima, sa ating, even in terms of disaster risk reduction, siya ang aming go-to person. Yeah. Siya ang aming tinatanong, nilalapitan, kinakausap. Si Sharon po ay matagal na sa Pilipinas, kukwento niya sa inyo mamaya. Baka mas mahusay pa siyang magbisaya kaysa sa akin. At siya ang ating kakwentuhan ngayong gabi. In English, in Tagalog, and in Bisaya. No birds. So, let us all welcome siya. Pakita ka na. Yeah. Hi, Sharon.
Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat.
Welcome siya to this episode of Senior City and salamat for joining us. Salamat sa pagpapaunlak ng aming invitation for you to join us tonight.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, at saka pinaghandaan po ni Sharon ang gabing ito. Pinaghandaan niya ang ating topic sa gabing ito, birds.
Ayan po. So, Um, Maliban po sa marine expert po natin si Ma'am Sharon, nag-take din po siya ng participation and leadership po talaga sa isang project natin about biodiversity as well. So, yun po yung pagpupukusan ng ating conversation ngayon at kung paano po yun nalilig yung project na yun to really preserve our biodiversity and not just preserve it but also improve it in a way and spread awareness about it kasi nga totoo na yung climate change. Hindi na lang siya katang-isip, hindi na lang siya theory, kundi nararamdaman na natin siya. At nasa ang loob ka man ng mundo. Kung
Di siya
mapatubig
fake.
man o napadagat, hindi na siya fake news talaga. So, Ma'am Sha, pwede niyo po bang ibahagi sa amin yung project na ito at ano po yung impact nito sa biodiversity or paano po ito naglilink kumbaga sa pag-uusapan po natin ngayon in terms of the World Wildlife Day.
Sige. Thank you po, Miss Berna. Before I go into the actual project and the implementation, I'll just give you a little bit of a background. Why is it important that we're having this session, this topic today? In 2 days, it will be the World Wildlife Day. Ang title yan sa World Wildlife is Wildlife Conservation Finance, Investing in People and the Planet. So if we go into the next slide. Thank you. This is the actual banner for this day, the March 3 day. And as you can see in the center, it's not just land-based, it's not just sea-based, it's not just air-based. It's the whole combination with the two hands surrounding these ecosystems. So we have to take an integrated approach, talaga. If we go into the next slide, this shows why it's important to take that integrated approach. Everything in our environment is connected. The people, the economy, most especially the environment as well, especially dito sa Filipinas when the main economy is based on the natural resources. So kung hindi na mag-alaga sa natural resources, kulang sa pera, kulang sa sweldo, kulang sa kita sa tao. Pero kailangan na mag-utilize those natural resources in a way that's sustainable. Kung na mag-overuse, sira ang lahat, basically. Kulang sa kita, kulang sa environmental conservation, kulang sa protection sa environment against climate-related hazards. Halimbawa, kung malakas ang ulan, kung kalbo sa forest areas, prone na para sa landslides, soil erosion, lahat-lahat. This all comes downstream, flooding sa lowlands, flooding sa cities, and all of that gets carried out to sa dagat. So, sira sa corales, sa seaweeds, sa lusay, sa halaman sa dagat, etc. So it's all interconnected. So if we are able to tackle one aspect, hirap para na mag-tackle lahat, overwhelming yun. So step by step kailangan. Pero kailangan na mag-isip lahat sa connectivity throughout the ecosystems. Okay? Kung hindi na magagawa yun, walang sustainable development. Kung business as usual, massive and rapid urbanization, massive land use change, we will get that loss of biodiversity, which we are all dependent on para sa health of our planet. Okay. At the moment, the finance is going in the way worldwide of growth as usual, industrialization growth, which we've seen now with the climate science isn't such a good idea. Medyo hirap yun para sa buong ecosystem, sa buong planet with global warming. If we carry on with that, walang sustainable development. So kailangan na mag-rethink, reimagine sa sustainable development. If we go into the next slide, magulit-ulit ako sa sustainable development, but what exactly is it? Sustainable development is the nexus of disaster risk reduction and management. It's at the nexus of climate change action. We see SD is right in the center of those three circles. The top circle is environmental responsibility. The bottom left circle is economic development. And the bottom right circle is social progress. We can't talk about development without these three aspects, but to make it sustainable, we have to look at the overlaps between each individual circle. So we have to have a viable world. Business practices should have a low negative environmental impact. A livable world. We need a better quality of life for all members of society, including the hearts are vulnerable, the hearts are marginalized. We need a more equitable world. And we need a fair world, gender equity and social inclusion, bring in economic prosperity. So no one's left behind, basically. The environment doesn't suffer, the economy still thrives, and society can still progress. Yun, medyo mahabang yun sa isip yan, di ba? So paano man gagawa? Hirap yun pang na mag-isip. Globally hirap pa na mag-isip yun. That's why, if we go into the next slide, the global community developed the Sustainable Development Goals. These didn't develop from scratch. These actually derived also from the Millennium Development Goals, which were previous goals, but now they've expanded out into 17 goals to try and work on each individual aspect, such as poverty, such as life underwater, life on land, education, all of these aspects, even though their individual goals are all interrelated. Okay? If we can work towards this interrelatedness and interconnectivity, not only of what I showed in the slide with all the arrows between the ecosystems, but also from that to society, to the economy, then if we go into the next slide, we should be able to work some of these solutions into working towards sustainable development. So there are progress points to be had. These are examples from the Philippines, from direct projects we've been involved with. These come from community-led projects, from community knowledge that have actually been implemented. Okay? And again, we show the interconnectivity. So if you plant a tree sa bundok, it's connected to enhanced infectious disease control. It's connected to agriculture. It's connected to fishing sa dagat. All throughout the systems, they're all connected. I'm not going to go through each box individually kasi hirap pang na magbasa yun kasi maliit. But the main message of these, both for the vulnerability slide and the solution slide, is the interconnectivity. Okay? Complex issues, but not necessarily complex solutions. Okay? So long as aware of the landscape approach, the ridge to reef approach, and the interconnectivity throughout, okay? And how each connects. If we go to the next slide, if we just take one of those boxes like agriculture, whether it's agroforestry or lowland agri, some ways that we can do sustainable land management on degraded lands, which is why kulang sa kita, kulang sa productivity sa agriculture. Pwede na magagawa sa crop diversification. Yung intercropping pwede, contour farming, agroforestry, conservation tillage, cover cropping, rainwater harvesting, integrated pest management, and reforestation. These are all actions that have already been taken on the ground. You look at the two photos, kasi madaming words yun. Kung hindi pwede na mag-imagine yan, anong mangyari. I called out two pictures from a project run by DABSWM. The one on the left shows at project start. The one on the right shows after 3 years. So halimbawa, kung malakas ang ulan, para sa first picture, Madli para na mag-wash out sa topsoil. Madli para pwede may landslide, taas ang risk yan. Taas ang risk ang baha sa communities sa lowland. Pero with the contour farming and sa diversification of crops, where ang ugat sa crops pwede na mag-stabilize the soil systems pa rin, na mag-feedback sa nutrients. It enhances the whole system and reduces those risks and vulnerabilities while enhancing agricultural produce. Makes sense, diba? These are the aspects we need to be investing the finance in. Okay? And one of the questions is, okay, pwede na magagawa yun, pero what has that to do with biodiversity? Yun mas magandang para sa economy, para sa hanap buhay, para sa regeneration, para na maglower sa potential panganib sa komunidad. Pero anong impact yun sa biodiversity, sa wildlife? Kasi these are important systems para sa wildlife pa rin. Okay? Kung kalbo ang lupa, as in the left-hand side, walang namigiwan yun really sa hayop. Walang foraging grass para sa hayop, walang insects, walang birds, walang ibon. Ayaw sila magstay yun. Pero with more cover, more shade, etc., a more dynamic system, as in the right-hand photo, mas madali yun para na mag-attract ang pagbalik sa wildlife and biodiversity. So it's not just a case of we're doing sustainable land management para sa hanap buhay sa magsasaka, pero lahat sa economy, sa tao, at saka sa environmental regeneration. Kasi kung hindi pwedeng ang environmental protection, environmental regeneration, hindi na magstay yun sa wildlife. Walang area pang breeding, walang area pang nursery, walang area para sa buhayin sa hayop, at saka insekto, at saka ibon, at saka lahat-lahat sa wildlife. Okay. So this is how sustainable land management ties into that. And because at the moment with business as usual, with the still prevalence of industrialization since the first start of the industrialization age, okay, konting history yan. Kailan na magsimula sa industrialization? Okay, I'll give you a minute. If you say 1861, tama ka. Matagal yun. And we're still going down that path. So there's still a lot of land conversion. There's still a lot of land use change. There's still a lot of degradation on the land that's not being changed either. So we have to start where we can to do this. Now you're probably saying, well, kung syudad ang bahay ako, layo yan ang isip. Pero pwedeng even within cities, pwede na magagawa sa greening programs, rooftop gardening, may vertical gardening, para baliking ang shade and greenery na mag-attract sa ibon. That's one thing I miss dito sa Metro Manila kaysa probinsya. Kulang na magrinig ang ibon dito. May pigeons, may sparrows, pero sa ibang klase, wala na. So, paano man yun? There is a potential even though urbanized ang cities pa rin. Right? Okay, back to sustainable land management. Next slide, please. Just to tie this back to the SDGs, this is SDG number 15, Life on Land, which the writing around this SDG is to protect, restore, promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss. Right. So kung gagawan lahat dyan, we can halt biodiversity loss. Right. Mahabang gagawa yun, di ba? And that's just one aspect of that interconnectedness that we see. So pinaka-importante yun talaga. Next slide, please. Okay, so examples. So direct, yun ang theory, yun ang background, yun ang context. So at the moment, PRRM is now a partner of the Department of Agriculture, the Bureau of Soils and Water Management, for a sustainable land management project within biodiversity corridors. So this consolidates a link between sustainable land management and Ajaka biodiversity in the two corridors within Mindoro, Ajaka, Eastern Mindanao, the eastern seaboard of Mindanao to be exact. And by establishing sustainable land management exemplar sites, the project will contribute to reducing land degradation, biodiversity conservation, and increasing resilience to climate-related hazards. So how do we do this? Sadly, para na magsulat yun, pero in practice, paano manggagawa? So we work with the local DABSWM staff para na mag-usap sa magsasaka within these areas, na mag-assess sa farms sila kung talaga degraded ang lupa dyan. And then kung na mag-fit sila sa criteria of land degradation and the farmers are willing to uptake sustainable land management measures or are already working on them, pero mas gustong sila sa enhancement, yun na mag-enter namin. So, primero na mag-usap sa magsasaka and then work with them in identifying their issues. We work with them in identifying anong kailangan sila talaga. If those needs match what the project can provide, yun na mag-work through sa workshops talaga. So we're working with the communities to find their issues, to find the solutions, and see where this project can support in realizing those solutions. So contour farming, provision of fruit trees, workshops on, we will be looking at marketing and trading kasi kung na may sa prutas, hindi necessarily ang priority sa areas sa market para sa prutas. Sa paano naman gagawa yun? Mais, palay, pwedeng yun. Pero sa prutas, less so. So para na so hindi namigay na lang ang fruit trees, hindi namigay na lang ang contour farming, pero we work through the whole system. So we're looking at the continuity of the project as well. And then monitoring anong impact yun sa land deg. Are we actually reducing the land degradation? Are we actually contributing towards biodiversity conservation? So be working with the farmers in monitoring this as well. We'll also be looking at carbon accounting as well, because we have to look at the soil organic carbon as part of our monitoring indicators. So are we actually working towards climate change mitigation in the end as well? So again, another facet of sustainable land management. But again, importante is we work with the local farmers, the local practitioners, the local LGUs that support the local farmers as well. The agricultural offices, the local DABSWM staff, through to the planning officer, kasi importante para sila na mag-develop sa land use plans, etc. Okay. And the budgeting and financing para sa annual plans, development plans sila. So again, madaming stakeholders, pero primarily we go to the direct beneficiaries sa comunidad. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. So PRRM, as we said, is now a partner of DABSWM. This project is funded by the Global Environment Facility through the UNDP. So this is a global fund. Don't forget, the theme of the World Wildlife Day is financing people in the environment. So let's talk a little bit about the finance. It's fine about the community-led approach, but we do need the project budget to be able to support that. This project is funded by the Global Environment Facility Project 6 here in the Philippines through the UNDP. Next slide, please. Okay, back to history. The Global Environmental Facility was established ahead of the Rio Earth Summit. Now, we're talking 1992 on this. Another name for the Rio Earth Summit, so it's held in Rio de Janeiro, hence the Rio It's the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. So even in the early 90s, it was realized we can't carry on as we're doing. We need to set some measures in place to try and halt the degradation that we're seeing on the environment. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. So the outcomes of the Rio Earth Summit, we had a declaration on the environment and development. We had a statement of principles for a global consensus on forests. We had the Convention on Biological Diversity, Agenda 21. Now, this Agenda 21 actually gave birth to the Philippine Agenda 21, which was a 300-page plan on the international agenda for sustainable development. So we have environment, development, forests, biological diversity, sustainable development, just within those 4 documents. And then the last one, climate change. Dun, dun, dun. Back one slide. The bottom right picture is a picture of our former president, Izagani Serrano. He actually attended all the prep meetings to the Rio Earth Summit, which gave birth to the Global Environment Facility, which funds this present project, a PRRM, as well as attending the actual Rio Earth Summit, plus the Rio Plus 10, the Rio Plus 20, and all the follow-up. What it actually says towards just to the right of his picture is humanity in trouble, but hopeful. Humanity in trouble, but hopeful. So even in the early 90s, it was realized if we carry on business as usual, we're in trouble. But there was a motivation, there was an enthusiasm. But yes, we can take steps to halt this progress of degradation. This carries through at the moment as well, because we've just had a soft book launch for Gani's book on reimagining sustainability. This is a book that will have a collection of his articles on sustainable development. The first chapter, actually second chapter, is dedicated to the environment. So watch out for this coming out, being published. Okay, climate change. Kai threw me a curveball with this one. So we've said, yes, we can be hopeful on this. There are measures we can take. Okay, we're in trouble. Yes, there's a lot of vulnerabilities when it comes to protecting wildlife. One measure we've shown through the sustainable land management. That is just one aspect. I nearly said tiny aspect, but malaking trabaho yun. So hirap para na magsabi tiny. But in the bigger picture, the global picture, it's a very relevant piece of the jigsaw puzzle. Right? That's without climate change. Climate change is going to throw us a curveball on this. If we go into the next slide.
Before we go there, Sha, I just want
Yeah.
parang look back on the first half of what you shared, no? This is the investing part, no? When you
Yes.
said GEF, when you said there's lots of projects that we're doing, not only us, but even the local governments and departments, executive departments of the government. Yun yung investing part eh. So the first part of the title of our episode tonight is investing, wildlife investment. So that's what Sharon briefly described and elaborated on in the last 20 minutes or so. So yun po yung kailangan na meron talagang ipinapasok tayo, meron tayong ini-invest. Binanggit ni Sharon na it's not only funds that we continue to invest, it's really the relating with people, building people's capacities, working with farmers organizations. Investment din yun eh. It's also an investment that will that hopefully will bring out the results in wildlife conservation, wildlife preservation and development, which Sharon will continue to talk to us about in a while. Uh, oh, in trouble always, but we always remain to be
Still
hopeful.
hopeful.
Sige siya. Let us continue.
Thank you. Yes. So in a nutshell, the investment is not just monetary. Time, partnerships, networking, importante yun. But we have to make up with what damage has already been done by continuing industrialization since the 1860s. We cannot say climate change is not an issue. Climate change is an issue. It is upon us. We have to acknowledge that the climate is changing. It is happening. It is accelerating, and it's going to get worse before it gets better, if it gets better. That's a big if. Okay, that's the picture behind this slide is the eye of a storm. Okay. Okay. Next slide. Do we have the next slide? Yeah. The Earth is warming. The latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, assessment report number 6, shows that the Earth is warming. It has risen by 1.1 degrees C since the 1860s. Now, this slide should normally raise some questions. Either it raises questions or people switch off. So, sana hindi sa latter. I'll go through the potential questions. I'm going to make assumptions. These are your questions for the viewers here. Swan, bakit may polar bears? Walang polar bears dito sa Pilipinas. Bakit may yellow? Walang yellow dito. Unless galing sa ref. Talaga. Walang snow. Snow in the Constitution. I don't think so. But basically, we have to think globally on this. The ice caps, the glaciers, the ice coverage in the Arctic and the Antarctic is melting at an increased, accelerated rate kaysa dating isip sa scientists. Pero layo yun kaysa dito sa Pilipinas. So bakit na mag-usap ako pa rin yan? Kasi kung dagdag sa tubig galing sa yellow sa dagat, may sea level rise, yun may impact dito sa Pilipinas. And it's already being felt. Mas malapit sa dagat na yung kaysa dati kung para sa coastal communities. Kung may storm surges, they pass further inland kaysa dati. Yung galing sa potentially an indirect effect of the ice caps melting. Ang hayop yun sa polar bears, wildlife yun. In the Arctic region, they are suffering habitat loss. So think also about if we carry on industrialization dito sa Pilipinas, land use change as well, how much of the wildlife's habitat is also disappearing as well. How much further will it disappear with this temperature increase of 1.1 degrees C? That leads me to my third potential question you may be thinking. Bakit 1.1 degrees C ang delikado? Bakit highlighted in bold ang red sa slide yun? Kasi ang difference between sa madaling araw at saka hapon, sobrang grabing yun. Ay sa 1.1. Okay. Senior citizens groups dito, di ba? Sino, I won't say nanay, tatay, pero lola, lolo, di ba? Sino may grandchildren dito? What happens kung magdagdag 1 degree C ang temperature sa katawan sila? May lagnat, di ba? Pwede may convulsions. So yun kailangan na mag-isip ang level of intensity sa 1.1 degree C dito. At the moment, the world is feverish, going towards convulsions with this. Okay? So think along that level of degree increase along ang katawan sa tao. Huwag nang mag-isip between ang difference between sa madaling araw at kahapon. Okay? Next slide. Okay, madaming sulat dito, pero ang main message is in bold. there's a more than a 50% chance, so we've got a 50-50 chance that global temperature will reach or surpass 1.5 degrees C between 2021, oh, that was 4 years ago, and 2040. Yeah. Ito importante sa 1.5. Bakit na mag-intake ang breath ako to? Kasi may agreement sa global community that we should not pass 1.5 degrees C. Kaya para na mag-isip sa scientists kung lampas sa 2, 1.5 to 2, anong sa feedback mechanisms that could accelerate the impacts of climate change sa bagong klima. Okay, so 1.5 was set in the Paris Agreement at the Conference of Parties that was held in Paris. Yun. In fact, 2024, to be exact, February 2023 to February 2024, isang taon, we were above, or we had reached 1.5 degrees C, in excess of the industrial age temperatures. However, when we're looking at global climate change, we have to look at more than months or years. When we measure climate change, it's temperature change over at least 30 years. So 30 taon. So even though we've been above, or we've been on or above 1.5 degrees C for isang taon, that's not enough to say we've reached this limit at the moment. But the warning signs are there. We have to remember as well, 2024 was ang panahon sa El Nino pa rin. So may increased temperatures with El Nino, which is a natural phenomena. Okay, next slide. Kawawang polar bear, yun na mag-iwan, yun ang yellow. So this shows quite drastically the habitat loss they are facing. The Earth was going to warm even more by 2 to 6 degrees C in the next 100 years. Yeah. Right, next slide. Why is 1.5 degrees C important? What it means and why it matters. Okay, next slide. This is what the scientists have come up with. Right. Kaya para na mag-usap sa climate change kung walang science behind it. We need these projections, we need these scenarios galing sa scientists, and then translate them locally pa rin. What does it mean para sa magsasaka, sa mangingisda, the general public? Right. If we're looking at wildlife, if we get to ecosystems, we are going to see a rising number of species facing extinction once we reach about 2 degrees C. Yun ang highlight si Miss Kai. At the moment, we're already seeing ang damage sa coral reefs. May coral reef bleaching at the moment. Yun ang problem because that makes them more vulnerable to storm surges, mas mabilis na magsira, and loss of habitat para sa isda. Okay. For the rising number of species facing extinction, kung na mag-extinct sila, they don't come back. Okay. So we said above glaciers are disappearing, there'll be a decrease in water availability. Okay. We'll be heading more towards drought conditions or prolonged drought conditions. We will be looking at problemas of food supply and food security. If we're getting crop yield decrease kasi sobrang init ang panahon. Okay. However, halimbawa, kung sa aking bansa, sa UK, temperate ang bansa yun, kung dagdag konting temperature, okay na sa productivity, sa gulay, halaman, lahat sa ibang agricultural ingredients. And to a certain point. Kung lampas yun, problema pa rin. But kailangan na lamang tao yun para na mag-diversify to the higher temperature tolerance crops as well. So it's not all negative impacts with climate change. There are positive impacts put in to a point. Okay. However, dito sa Pilipinas, so galing sa aking bansa, let's come back to the Philippines, it is going to have an impact on extreme weather events. We are going to see potentially increasing intensity of storms, not necessarily frequency, but intensity. We're on the typhoon belt. So, yun. We're also going to see more extreme rainfall events, which can lead to floods, flash floods, landslides, rain-induced landslides, etc. So this is why it's important that we put these sustainable land management systems in place as soon as we can to try and mitigate these effects. Okay. And then the bottom part is risk of irreversible change is just before 2 degrees C. So that's why in Paris they set the limit at 1.5 because once we reach 2, too late. So 1.5 is sort of like the Al Gore's message was the 11th hour, diba? So 11th hour, 59 minutes, 59 seconds is 1.5 degrees C. Okay, once we get to the 12th hour, hirap pala na mag-isip anong mangyari talaga. Okay, so yes, climate change is throwing a major curveball at us for sustainable development initiatives, but we do remain hopeful purely because of we need the multi-sectoral approach. No one person can tackle this anymore by themselves. They couldn't do it before without climate change. They definitely can't do it now with climate change. But we've seen communities, NGOs, CSOs, private sector, academe, government, all working together within this country to try and tackle this. We have plenty of laws in the Philippines para na magsuportahan ito. We have plenty of laws globally. Problema is implementation. So this is why we do need to go back to the finance mechanisms to support this. For the time and dedication and motivation sa bawat tao to take up these issues, take up these remedies, take up these measures to try and alleviate the impacts. Diyon bakit importante. Kahit ngayon World Wildlife Day na lang, wide range that covers. Galing sa tao, galing sa economy, galing sa environment mismo. All importante. Okay. So finally, just a summary. Next slide, please. We do need a community-led approach. Kailangan ng knowledge galing sa tao talaga on the ground. But we also need the cross-sector collaboration and coordination. Importante yun. We need an inclusive and participatory process. We need to go back to a rights-based approach. Kailangan naming include sa babae, sa bata, persons with disability, the LGBTQIA, I think is where we're at the moment. Kailangan na mag-include lahat. Lahat has valuable knowledge that can contribute to these measures that will alleviate the climate change impacts, that will alleviate the environmental degradation we're seeing at the moment. However, we do need that evidence-based design of interventions. So kailangan na mag-collectahan ng knowledge yan. Not all practices on the ground are necessarily good practices either. So we have to be able to analyze that evidence to see, yes, this works. Okay. We have a lot of pockets of intervention across the country. How can we gather that knowledge and alleviate it up into enabling policy environment that enables these local actions on the ground, that enable these inclusive and participatory processes? Okay. So importante na mag-integrate sa local indigenous knowledge with the scientific knowledge. Not one takes priority here. Like I said before, kung mag-usap sa bagong klima, sa climate change, kailangan sa science. But you also need to know how that is impacting people on the ground. The people on the ground need to know saan pwede na mag-access sa climate information. Paano naman na mag-alam anong meaning yun? para sa hanap buhay sila. Yun importante sa Nexus yun. So knowledge management, pinaka-importante yun pa rin to inform action. And we need proactiveness rather than reactiveness. Hindi pwede na mag-wait para, uy, may baha dito. Anong mangyari? May landslide dito. Anong mangyari? Bakit na yung walang ibon dito? Dati meron. Too late. Kailangan na magagawa na yun. I was saying, the global community has been looking at this as an issue since the 90s. It's still an issue. But it doesn't mean to say we haven't done nothing in the past. 3 decades, 3.5 decades now. We have pockets of information. We need to stitch those pockets together so it comes mainstream across. So yes, we are still hopeful. The science, the scenarios are bleak, but there's still hope. Okay, next slide. Yan. Maraming salamat po. Daghang salamat. Thank you. As Kai said earlier, alam ako sa lahat sa salita yan. Pero
3 different languages.
konti na yun sa Bisaya kasi kulang sa practice dito sa Metro Manila to. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope it's been thought-provoking, and I hope to see a lot of questions in the comment section that we can come back to. Thank you.
Yeah, originally meron po tayong 3 insight questions. Pero
Yes.
all of those questions are actually covered na by the slides of Ma'am Sha. Because the first question is like the examples of, how land management practices or like the project specifically manage ngayon ng PRRM with PADSWM, like how it impacted to the biodiversity in specific regions and ecosystems. The second one is, ano yung ini-envision nating future relationship between the sustainable land management and biodiversity in the context of climate change, which actually just answered earlier. And yung pangatlo naman pong tanong, which is yung sagot na rin po nung una, is like, how is it important yung collaboration between different sectors from agriculture, the conservation, the urban planning, etc., with different government agencies then and stakeholders like the community, the NGOs, the academia, and other even private sectors din po in promoting the SLM and biodiversity conservation. So, thank you on that, Ma'am Sha. Pero share ko lang din po, and parang with all of these things, kasi we're talking about wild investment. And Ma'am Sha already mentioned information management is actually part of the wild investment. And for me, at least for me, it's like somehow a low budget investment in terms of financial aspect, pero very, very big yung magiging impact niya if executed properly, especially for our youth, right? Kasi like for the youth's perspective naman, kasi parang heavy naman ito, wild investment, wild returns. Pero siguro for the youth din na nanonood, mga estudyante, kolehiyo, or even out of school youth, like let's reflect bakit may no uniform policy in a certain month of the academic year. And that is because of climate change. Dahil ang init, 'di ba, ng magsuot ng uniform in a specific month. I think it's around April, March, April po ata. At least yun po yung naalala ko nung kolehiyo pa po ako. And for us, like siguro because that's like the direct impact and yun talaga yung nafe-feel natin na affected tayo sa climate change because of that. Pero there's a lot of factors pa rin na apektado tayo. Dati di naman natin kailangan mag-electric fan all throughout the day. Pero ngayon kailangan na kasi sobrang init na. And yung iba hindi na nadadaan ng electric fan. Like meron ng air cooler, aircon, para lang talaga hindi ka na mainitan, hindi ka na malakitan. And that's really the impact. And siguro for the youth voice lang din kasi kanina rin po, meron din pong youth symposium, yung World Wildlife Day together with the FPE Foundation of Philippine Environment, yes, and other from Southeast Asia din po. So naka-join ako dun sa symposium, and there's like two youth org from Cambodia and Laos na they shared something like very practical projects that they have then. And then one of the things that they've shared is yung youth org na yon, they actually tawag dito, pinopromote nila yung urban garden. And it's very easy, di ba? Urban garden. Pero they see it as there's a big opportunity for that just to help with the climate change. Kasi in the future, it could involve like designing cities with green infrastructure, yung rooftop gardens, yung urban parks na can increase biodiversity. And sinasabi nga ni Ma'am siya kanina, kapag madaming puno, madaming greens, madaming shades, nakaka-attract yun ng mga wildlife animals like the birds, insects, and it can also provide better air and water quality around the area. So yun po yung isa sa mga ano nila, nabanggit nila. And I think to add that as well, like going back to the school din, na dapat yung school din mismo, like bring back that school garden, hindi na yung technology piece of it na high-tech na yung mga bata ngayon. Pero going back to the basic, like paano mga ba namumuhay yung mga Pinoy dati? Like paano naglalaro sa labas, pinagpapawisan, nakakahawak ng putik, yung mga ganon. So like going back to that experience, naturuan pa rin yung mga bata up until now on how to plant, how to cultivate their own plant, paano ipapag-grow yun, and then moving forward as we grow, like very big din nun, scope din nun on the information management side is maging aware yung mga kabataan ngayon na sumuporta sa climate smart agriculture. Doesn't have to be a farmer kung hindi talaga yun yung heart ng mga bata, pero like supporting farmers doing that is a very big piece and motivation din sa ating mga farmers ngayon na isa sa mga apektado. Hindi lang naman sila kasi pati din tayo kasi our daily lives is hindi lang naman isolated yung case ng climate change. Lahat naman tayo ay nararanasan yun. So, yan po.
Thank you, Burns. Yung mga kinuwento ni Berna, parang in our own little ways, meron din tayong ginagawang sarili nating wildlife investing. At bukod doon sa mga malalaking programa, malalaking proyekto na may mahalagang kontribusyon sa wildlife conservation and development, meron din yung mga maliliit nating ginagawa ay bigay din ng contribution sa ganitong wildlife investing. At yung mga binanggit din ni Sharon kanina ay may wildlife results. Kung naalala niyo yung slides ni Sharon na yung interconnectedness ng mga challenges and issues sa climate change, biodiversity loss, etc. Yung kabilang slide naman ay nagpapakita na kung in-address natin itong mga issues na to at gumawa tayo ng mga solutions, meron ding pagkakaugnay-ugnay yung magiging impacts or magiging effects. Yun din naman yung wildlife results. So that's our title, the wildlife investing at saka yung wildlife results. Tapos ako din yung habang nag-share ka, Sharon, kanina was wildlife ang focus natin ngayon, Wildlife Day sa March 3. Pero nag-usap na tayo ng ang dami-dami, no? Biodiversity, sustainable land management, climate change, SDGs. Because ang lahat ng bagay ay magkaugnay. Kaya kailangang pag-isipan po natin talaga, ano. That's one other pala, dagdag ko lang doon sa sinabi ni Bernal, what we can do in our own small ways. Kontakin niyo po yung inyong mga congressman, yung inyong mga mayor, yung inyong mga konsehal. Kung may nakikita at naiisip kayong pwedeng gawin, pwedeng investment sa inyong local biodiversity, sa inyong local wildlife. Kausapin nyo sila, sumulat kayo, bigyan nyo ng pag-iisipan at ipa-project ang inyong mga congressman. Kaya dapat pumipili kayo ng mahuhusay na congressman at yung gagawa ng matino habang sila ay nasa pwesto nila bilang congressman. So that's another parang line of action, yung policy work na pwede nating gawin. Hindi lang bilang organizations, kundi individually, we can also do something about it, no? About local policy that will protect, that will invest in, that will help develop our local biodiversity, our local wildlife. Kaya maganda po yung sharing ni Sharon kanina dahil ang daming ah, pinuntahan, no? Ang daming connect niya talaga. Hindi malayong connection kundi talagang magkakalapit na connection talaga 'to. Tama, Miss Burns?
Yes po. And siguro dagdag ko rin po na habang kino-contact niyo rin yung mga local LGUs niyo, sa darating din po na Mayo, like, use your vote to vote for biodiversity. Vote for our planet. To invest in people and our planet. Kasi hindi naman masama na bumoto ka dahil kilala mo yung tao yun. Pero knowing their platforms, kung ano yung agenda nila, and a bigger picture na hindi lang ikaw yung makikinabang, kundi yung pamilya mo, kapatid mo, susunod nyo na henerasyon, lalo na kung lalaki ka. Diba, magpapatuloy yung generations na. Like, vote for those right people na may plataporma talaga for not just for one specific sector, kundi yung nasasakop niya buong sektor. Like yung fisher folks, yung agriculture or farmers natin, not just farmers, kundi madami tayong iba't mga farmers, may rice, may coconut farmers pa dyan. And yung youth sector especially, and of course, mga manggagawa natin. So, OFWs na kaya na nilang bumalik ng Pilipinas because our economy is rising na because we put the right people in the position. So, sa darating po na May, bumoto po tayo ng tama.
Bumoto para sa wildlife at biodiversity at climate action. Yan.
Same.
Soon. So for tonight, nako malaking thank you. Daghan salamat kay Sharon for preparing this this PowerPoint na malinaw na naipaliwanag sa atin. Siguro Sharon, next time invite ka namin ulit, no, for a follow through discussion
I will
about
be
this.
honored. I will be honored. And because the issues are not finite, as what's said in that slide, I'm sure there's many more. The solutions are not finite. So if you'd like to drop a line in the comment section when you watch this, your own personal experiences, that would be really, really good to take up as well. So thank
Yes.
you. It's been an honor for me to share this tonight. And yes, I would look forward to the next invite.
Yes, we will again invite you, Sharon. Please, don't make sawa. Huwag kang magsawa. May pag-imbita sa'yo. So thank you really, Sharon, for sharing your
My
project.
pleasure.
And, yeah, your knowledge, your insights about the topic for tonight, na yung wildlife investing and wildlife results. So that's our episode for tonight. Oo. Ano ang
And
ating bang episode next week, Berna? Meron bang
yes,
Mer-
meron
meron.
tayong baon. May
meron
baon po
tayong
tayo. Yes. But before po that, baka din po
Okay.
pwede natin pag-usapan yung youth-led actions naman on biodiversity, climate
Sure.
change, and everything in between. Para naman bida yung mga kabataan.
Oo nga.
Ayan. And for our next episode po, for our episode number 10 for the next Saturday, March 8, we will be celebrating the artsy-artsy side of ng pagkukwentuhan natin, the aesthetic side, kasi we're going to celebrate and talk about World Poetry Day. Ayan.
Oh.
Exciting because the theme for this year is poetry as a bridge for peace and inclusion. So again, it also ties back with the policy side of the World Wildlife Day. and biodiversity. So,
And
yeah.
the Reimagining Sustainability book, because the book will also contain poems written by Gani Serrano. So,
Yeah.
balik tayo dun sa libro, abangan natin yung libro na yon, which will be made available to universities para mapag-aralan ng mga estudyante. At not only to universities, pero it will be made public, of course, para mapakinabangan ng iba't ibang sektor na nagpupursigi ng sustainable development in the Philippines.
And to
And
also, I'm sorry po, and to also introduce Sir Isagani Isagani Serrano, kasi naalala ko kagahapon kasi pumunta po tayo ng Bataan. Pero kukwento din natin to next week.
nga pala.
Isa sa mga estudyante nagsabi doon na hindi niya kilala si Sir Gani, and I myself hindi ko rin siya naabutan sa PRM. Pero ang dami kong natutunan about him. Ang dami ng mga philosophy, yung klaseng mindset na meron siya. So it will be very, very interesting topic po for next week.
Yes. So, dyan po natin tapusin ang ating episode for tonight, Senior City Kwentuhan, investing in wildlife and looking for the results from these investments. Ulit, salamat po sa ating guest na si Sharon Taylor, Dr. Sharon Taylor, for joining us tonight. Thank you, Burns. Thank you, JM. Thank you, Andy, sa lahat ng mga tumulong para ma-create ang ating episode, ma-co-create ang ating episode tonight. Okay, so
Thank
goodbye
you
and
po.
salamat. Bye, Sha!